Shields offline.
Corporations. The grandest society of merchants in the universe. Self-applied description of the East India Company, 1600 to 1708. Corporations. Introduction. During the centuries in which humanity was confined to a single planet, corporations were naturally limited in size and influence, like fish in a bowl. With access to a finite quantity of natural resources and a relatively small arena in which to compete, corporations could not achieve their full theoretical potential. But with the advent of interstellar travel, the fishbowl became an ocean. Corporations could access and exploit entire planets for their mineral resources, and an expanding population, eagerly colonizing system after system, meant a growing customer base. To the governments of the time, the potential for corporate growth was both thrilling and terrifying. Commercial prosperity meant increased tax revenue and higher employment figures, but also raised the worrying prospect of security fleets that could rival the official militaries. It seemed inevitable that the largest corporations would, in time, become the equivalent of nation-states in their own right. With the old restrictions gone, there was simply nothing to stop them. Today, this vision has been partly fulfilled, with several corporations owning entire systems. For many corporate employees, the age-old distinction between a home and a workplace has vanished. Workers on corporate-owned ships, refineries, and outposts can expect to spend their entire lives in the embrace of the company. Despite their immense wealth and power, the corporations have thus far been content to operate within and remain subject to the jurisdictions of the Alliance, Empire, and Federation, rather than mount a serious challenge to any of them. Commentators point to two reasons for this. Firstly, corporations thrive by excelling in their chosen fields, and assuming the onerous responsibilities of a government would be a wasteful distraction from the corporate mission. Secondly, given that the corporations already hold much of the real power, especially in the Federation, there is nothing to be gained by abolishing the convenient veneer of the state. Better to operate below the surface, make a show of compliance, and trust in the power of money to smooth the way forward. Corporations. The Achilles Corporation. Optimize, iterate, refine. Achilles is the market leader in computer technology, and is particularly noted for developing the reliable, efficient navigation computers used by most starships. The fear of a hyperspace misjump following a computer malfunction, a nightmare scenario that Achilles capitalized on in its advertising, helped to cultivate strong brand loyalty in the company's early days. Achilles is also a pioneer in the field of robotics, meaning it has long been hampered by the interstellar ban on the development of self-aware artificial intelligence. In the late 3200s, rumors surfaced that the corporation was attempting to circumvent these restrictions by placing organically grown brains in robotic bodies. No evidence of any such activity has come to light, and Achilles board members have not deigned to dignify the rumors with a response. There has also been speculation the company's leaders are extensively cybernetically enhanced, given their history of uncompromising takeovers and corporate machinations. Even their open business operations are characterized by ruthless efficiency, while their private dealings are rumored to involve everything from the blackmail of rival executives to assassination. Achilles' official line is that these rumors are sheer fantasy and a predictable, envious response to success. Nonetheless, the rumors persist, and Achilles' reputation is now so daunting that smaller corporations will roll over at the first sign of a takeover bid, rather than attempt to negotiate for better terms. Nobody wants to become the subject of a career-ending rumor. Corporations. Cain Massey. Because an honest day's work never goes out of fashion. Cain Massey stands as an example of the power of rebranding. During the fiercely competitive era that followed the first migration from Earth, the company's original incarnation, Howlett, Cain and Calvert, rapidly established itself as a profitable mining concern. Through a combination of nepotism and bribery, HC&C secured a federal guarantee of mining rights across several systems, with the caveat that failure to exploit the resources within a set time frame would result in forfeiture. In order to set up their mining operations as quickly as possible, HC&C cut corners on safety, skimped on equipment quality, and made exorbitant promises to potential employees, promises that were later defaulted on. Workplace accidents, which were frequent, were hushed up. By the time these problems came to light, HC&C was a household name, and the fallout was severe. Token attempts at recompense were made, but the company's public image was badly tarnished. A merger with struggling but respected logistics firm Massey Haulage gave HC&C an opportunity to reinvent itself as the local mining company. The rebranded corporation, Cain Massey, presented itself as a salt-of-the-earth, blue-collar operation whose hard-working employees were treated with dignity. In an uncertain universe, so the advertisements ran, Cain Massey would always be there for you. The campaign was a huge success. Today, Cain Massey is now widely perceived as an old-fashioned company that both understands and sticks up for the working man and woman. But despite this wholesome image, and although safety standards have improved, the company is as acquisitive and concerned with expansion as ever. Corporations. Core dynamics. Unmatched interstellar supremacy. Core Dynamics is a giant conglomerate, best known as one of the galaxy's premier manufacturers of weapon and surveillance systems and starships, with a particular focus on combat vessels. Its product line ranges from the diminutive Eagle to the gargantuan Farragut-class battlecruiser, and also includes the most popular skimmer in the galaxy, the S-4 Sentry. The company is known for its occasional discount events, offering reduced-cost ships either in celebration of a new design or as incentives for participation in a community endeavor. Core Dynamics has a long-standing supply agreement with the Federation and is responsible for the Federal Assault Ship, Corvette, Dropship, and Gunship. As part of this relationship, the company benefits from privileged access to federal black box data reserves, which it uses in its research and development branch. In the ongoing quest for more robust and effective ship designs, there is no substitute for data gleaned from genuine combat encounters. Corporations. Falcon de Lacy. Bridging the stars for half a millennium. Falcon Manspace, originally a small military supply company, experienced an overnight reversal of fortune when it released the Viper fighter, which proved popular with governments and private citizens alike. Indeed, demand was so high that Falcon Manspace had to farm out Viper production to other companies under license. With wealth came innovation and a range of new designs. Like the Viper, these new ships were named after dangerous snakes. The Cobra marked the company's entry into the trader market, while the lightweight, versatile Sidewinder was designed principally as a reconnaissance craft. As the company's wealth grew, it began to absorb many of the companies to which it had previously granted manufacturing contracts. In almost all cases, the target company's close working relationship with Falcon Manspace made such acquisitions frictionless and mutually beneficial. In 2982, the corporation merged with one of the largest such manufacturers, DeLacy Shipworks, becoming Falcon DeLacy. The company pioneered the now standard modular system of ship design that allows pilots to swap out components with ease. Significantly, the company made the schematics for the modular system freely available to its manufacturing rivals, broadening the choice of compatible modules available to pilots, and thus making the Falcon DeLacy marks more popular. Without this philosophy of component compatibility, spacecraft maintenance might have become a nightmarish scenario in which being unable to get the proper parts could leave a broken-down ship stranded in dry dock for weeks, or worse, subject to botched repair attempts. Today, Falcon DeLacy stands out as one of the most enduring, widespread, and consistently admired corporations in colonized space. Public regard for the company is so high that the Alliance, Empire, and Federation have all made attempts to secure exclusivity to Falcon DeLacy starships. Thus far, their efforts have been unsuccessful. Corporations. Gutermeyer. Effortless elegance. Ship manufacturer Gutermeyer enjoys a supply agreement with the Empire, similar to that between Core Dynamics and the Federation. Gutermeyer is a far younger company, however, and was in fact created by the Empire. The company's ships are considered to embody imperial opulence and are instantly recognizable for their sleek contours and distinctive silhouettes. Imperial Gutermeyer was chartered by Emperor Galen Trascan de Val in 3000 as part of a formal celebration of the millennium, in line with the Emperor's vision of an imperial renaissance in art, design, and architecture. The company's remit, overseen by shipwrights Jordan Blakestow and sculptor Amita Gutermeyer, was to produce a line of ships that will combine functional excellence with a distinct visual style. These would be offered for a limited period to select members of imperial noble houses as a mark of the Emperor's favor. Amita Gutermeyer's involvement was immediately apparent, a reputation having been established through well-regarded public artworks incorporating graceful, contoured forms. This helped to drive public demand for the ships, which became sought-after status symbols. Demand was so high that owners were forced to hire squadrons of mercenary escorts to prevent hijack. The Emperor promptly ordered Imperial Gutermeyer to go into full-time production and to make part of its range available for general purchase. From its inception, Gutermeyer has employed a coterie of accomplished imperial artisans to ensure that their ships continue to reflect Amita Gutermeyer's aesthetic principles. When, in 3006, Amita Gutermeyer died in unexplained circumstances, she was interred in the Gutermeyer family crypt on Achenar 6B. Corporations. Lakon Spaceways. Hard-working ships for hard-working people. Lakon Spaceways is a starship manufacturer specializing in sturdy vessels for cargo haulage and deep space exploration. They have a longer pedigree than most other ship manufacturers, their first dedicated transport vessel having been built on Earth in the 26th century. The company's early models were characterized by the fact that they could be easily repaired away from port, a quality that has been retained to this day, despite the prevalence of affordable repair services. In 3303, Lakon entered into partnership with the Alliance to produce a range of military ships in response to the emerging Thargoid threat. As of 3304, this partnership has produced the Type 10 Defender, the Alliance Chieftain, the Alliance Crusader, and the Alliance Challenger. Lakon vessels tend to garner both praise and derision for their unpretentious, functional design, which is informed more by practical concerns than aesthetic considerations. Those who champion the chunky look of Lakon craft typically say that they prefer their ships to look like ships, not abstract sculptures. Corporations. Mastopoulos Mining. 300 years of reliability. In 2951, an imperial senator named Mistopoulos helped an imperial group wrest control of a key set of mining rights from a federally backed partnership. Mistopoulos later took direct control of the mining operations, and under his and his daughter Nia's guidance, the company rapidly expanded. The Mistopoulos family was already held in great esteem for its patronage of the arts and loyalty to the empire, and many Imperials were more than happy to do business with them. Accordingly, it was within the empire that Mistopoulos gained the most ground, though the company also established operations in several independent systems. Much like the empire itself, Mistopoulos has been under the control of a single dynasty for centuries. Rather than adopt conventional marketing strategy, it has opted to focus its corporate spotlight on the individuals in charge, thus capitalizing on the imperial cultural regard for people of taste and status. The Mistopoulos family are trained from birth to play the part of charismatic aristocrats to the full, acting as ambassadors not only for the company, but for the empire. In particular, they seek to demonstrate the viability and humanity of the imperial way of life as a direct ideological challenge to the Federation. The company's current head, Gabriela Mistopoulos, has gone out of her way to ensure that any slaves working for the company are exceptionally well treated. She also earned plaudits for a prisoner reform program that offered imperial prisoners at Jennings Hollow the chance to become corporate slaves, and to earn a generous performance-related bonus. But despite the popularity of this gambit, Federal and Alliance citizens were quick to point out that a slave is still a slave, regardless of the generosity of the owner. Corporations. Saud Kruger. The finest for the best. To independent pilots, Saud Kruger is best known for luxurious passenger liners, such as the Beluga, Dolphin and Orca, although the company also runs a tourism branch under the Astrogator brand. Saud Kruger started life as a yacht manufacturer in Bedaho, although the narrowness of the market curtailed the company's growth. When company director Stanislav Kruger purchased the struggling Astrogator touring company in 3270, he gave Saud Kruger a foothold in multiple star systems. Kruger then refurbished the Astrogator fleet and revamped the somewhat stale tour itinerary to give it a more adventurous, thrill-seeking flavor, which proved highly successful. Goldskin leather, sourced exclusively from the planet home in the Bedaho system, has been used in the interiors of Saud Kruger ships for years and is part of the company's distinctive aesthetic. Saud Kruger has the exclusive right to produce real goldskin, which comes embedded with coded nanoparticles that act as guarantors of authenticity. Saud Kruger also competes in the field of interstellar mapping and deep space exploration, and likes to emphasize the danger and glamour of exploring. The company's critics claim this approach risks transforming the vitally important field of space exploration into a pastime for the idle rich, thus alienating the many freelancers on whose hard work the discipline depends. Corporations. The Sirius Corporation. Powering the galaxy. Of all the mega corporations to dominate civilized space, none compare to the wealth and influence of the Sirius Corporation. The rise of the Sirius Corporation began in 2339, when the organization launched a corporate colonization mission, the first of its kind, to the Sirius system. From there, the corporation went on to become the lead supplier of fuel and technologies to both the Empire and the Federation, catapulting it to powerhouse status. The corporation's promise not to favor either side in the event of conflict helped to cement its position. As the corporation grew, fuel supply and drive manufacture remained its core business, although judicious expansion into other markets supported its expansion. But the corporation's ascendance has not been without complication. In 3251, it introduced a technologically revolutionary passenger liner called the Antares, which it hoped would usher in a new age in interplanetary travel. Unfortunately, however, the ship disappeared during its maiden voyage. It was speculated that a failure in the ship's internal containment systems had destroyed the vessel, but it was not until 3302 that wreckage from the ship was recovered, and this hypothesis proved correct. The Antares incident cast a long shadow, stalling the Sirius Corporation's plans to develop further superfast liners. But 3278 saw a reversal of fortune with the introduction of a new, faster drive system. The success of this new system more than made up for the losses that followed the Antares incident, propelling the organization to new heights. Today, the corporation has multiple divisions, many of them giant conglomerates themselves. But its primary focus remains the manufacture of fusion reactors, hyperdrives, and hyperdrive fuels. This division still operates under the banner of the Sirius Corporation, although technically it is conducted by Sirius Hyperdrives, with the parent corporation acting as a holding company. The company's mining, industrial, and power divisions are probably its largest. Sirius Mining works closely with Sirius Industrial to produce specialist equipment for both planetary and asteroid mining, in addition to industrial smelters and refineries, atmospheric processing units, and waste processing reactors. Sirius Power produces generators ranging from 10 kilowatt devices to 100 gigawatt plants for industrial facilities and atmospheric processors. The Sirius Corporation maintains a large private fleet with which to defend its interests. The majority of its ships are supplied by Guatemala, although a proportion are manufactured under license in Sirius's own shipyards. The corporation controls dozens of star systems and has even created a governmental subdivision, Sirius Gov, dedicated to managing these systems. Indeed, it has been observed that the people of these systems enjoy better quality of life and greater personal security, courtesy of Sirius's private fleet than many independent systems. Corporations. The Rockforth Corporation. Living naturally. The Rockforth Corporation was founded in 2673 by the Rockforth family on Thompson's World, an unusually beautiful planet similar in almost all respects to Earth. Thompson's World began as a federal colony, but by 2748, Rockforth controlled so much of the planet that it was able to claim outright ownership and secede from the Federation. In its early years, the Rockforth Corporation earned significant revenue from tourism and genuine, ground-grown food. The former facilitated by the rise of affordable interstellar travel. Today, it is a powerful interstellar corporation specializing in agriculture and tourism, with hundreds of corporate farms throughout federal space. It has also a reputation for being acquisitive, having bought up many of its client companies, beginning with a friendly takeover of the law firm Smith & Smith, now known as Rockforth Law. In 2730, Rockforth Law established the Rockforth Legal Academy on Thompson's World, now considered one of the best places in the galaxy to study federal law. Rockforth has always been eager to work with governing powers, both federal and independent, and has occasionally loaned out its private fleet to help repel external threats. The company has even sponsored election campaigns, including that of the infamously corrupt federal president, Isaac Gellin, in 2862. Rather than being tarnished by its association with Gellin, however, the company's reputation was enhanced, since it was Rockforth itself that exposed the president's corruption. Corporations. Universal Cartographics. Because it's there. Before the frameshift drive was developed, the exploration of space lacked a single coordinating agency. Governments and corporations had in-house exploration programs, but these were driven by the desire for fresh, exploitable territory rather than any humanitarian motive. It was not unknown for these programs to enlist the help of freelance explorers, but as a class, these were seen as erratic and unreliable. The reputation of the freelance explorer was not helped by a rash of bogus data scandals, in which a pilot would present, and be paid for, impressive scan data from hitherto unexplored systems, that was later discovered to be counterfeit. The remoteness of the systems meant that the deception was not discovered until much later. Much like the sea captains of old Earth, whose rutters were full of closely guarded secrets, the owners of authentic navigation data were reluctant to share it. Theft of such data was a particularly prevalent concern in the late 2900s, when mistrust between the Empire and the Federation was at its most intense. Officials on both sides would occasionally propose a shared databank as a means of bridging the divide, but mutual suspicion killed the idea before it could be implemented. The creation of the frameshift drive greatly increased the jump capability of even small ships, empowering individuals to become bona fide space explorers without the need for corporate or governmental sponsorship. The stage was set for a corporation to manage, coordinate, and distribute the incoming flood of navigation data. Universal Cartographics filled that niche, arising from the merger of Unified Infotech and Devane Bright Interstellar. Cynthia Sedaris, former head of Unified Infotech, chose the name Universal Cartographics to reflect the company's policy of making its data accessible to anyone who was willing to pay for it. Sophisticated security protocols developed at Unified Infotech ensured that all data sold to Universal Cartographics was sourced through legitimate scanning. This combination of reliability and accessibility made Universal Cartographics an instant success. The company's ethos, which prized discovery for its own sake and championed the advancement of human knowledge, resonated with many independent explorers and continues to do so to this day. Corporations. Recon, an industry built to last. Recon Construction and Mining is one of the oldest interstellar corporations. It was founded over 1,000 years ago, but still bears the name of its founder, Tobias Recon, who was a coal miner on Earth in the days prior to full automation. Raised on stories of horrific mining disasters, Recon ran his extraction business with safety and prudence as top priorities. The corporate motto at the time ran, "Losses can be recouped and equipment can be repaired. Lives are irreplaceable." Generations later, this attitude of diligence over profiteering still ran strong in the company. It made Recon a compelling choice when corporations were looking to exploit the new opportunities presented by early deep space exploration. Extracting resources from asteroids, airless moons, and hazardous planets was an even more dangerous prospect than coal mining, and Recon's expertise did much to calm corporate nerves. Consequently, the company had a presence on almost all of the early federal chartered colony missions. Today, Recon specializes in the extraction of tantalum, a vital component in frameshift drives. The company is firmly established in alliance, federation, and independent territories, while its direct rival, Mastopoulos Mining, dominates in imperial space. Tensions between the two corporations have been high since Recon accused Mastopoulos of covertly seeding key planets with tiny, promising tantalum deposits, in the expectation that Recon's thoroughgoing approach would prompt a full survey, thus tying up valuable resources. Mastopoulos has not offered an official response to assertions, though at a formal dinner in 3303, Eleanor Mastopoulos made a pointed reference to the etymological link between Tantalus and tantalize, adding that it was not illegal to leave gifts on a neighbor's doorstep. Corporations. Worldcraft. Optimizing recreation. Based in the Epsilon Eridani system, Worldcraft has been the Federation's favorite tourism company for more than 300 years. The company began life as the Cisco Corporation, with tourist resources throughout human-occupied space. In the early part of the 33rd century, it dramatically increased the scope of its operation and began terraforming planets to create dedicated resort worlds, an operation facilitated through the use of Free World Ventures Worldcraft atmospheric processing units. Eager to exclude competitors from the market, Cisco bought Free World Ventures in 3260 via a leveraged buyout, doubling the size of the corporation overnight. At the time, Cisco was associated with the seedier end of the holiday market, which had prevented the company from successfully entering imperial space. Capitalizing on the acquisition of Free World Ventures and the respect afforded to the Worldcraft brand, the company shrewdly rebranded itself Worldcraft with a capital C, in the hope of establishing a presence in Imperial space. Worldcraft offers experiences ranging from excursions into unspoiled natural environments where families can admire dazzling views from the safety of a rented luxury vessel to painstakingly detailed reconstructions of periods of Earth history, such as the Victorian London theme park and the swords and swinging medieval reenactment experience. Individuals: Zachary Hudson.
The truth is that you cannot escape adversity. You have to stand up and face it, and that's how you get stronger. That's how you learn. Well, maybe you miss a meal or two. Maybe your kids have dirty faces and shabby clothes. If that's what it takes to get you out looking for work, then so be it. I'm not gonna insult you by pitying you, because I know you can do better. And you know it too. I'm not a monster, despite what the liberals think. I believe in government aid, but I believe it should be reserved for times of genuine crisis. And being poor is not a crisis. People can do remarkable things when they're properly motivated, and that motivation is something no amount of government money can provide. Without it, we'd still be on Earth, jostling for whatever scraps of living space the state gave us. I have a framed quotation on my wall. It's something my father used to say to me. When I got older, I found out it was by a man called Nuremberg, who lived a couple of thousand years ago. It says, certain divine rays break out of the soul in adversity, like sparks from the afflicted flint. Now you just think about that. Take all the time you need.
Zachary Hudson, Federal Times interview, 3293. Zachary Hudson is the president of the Federation, having won a vote of no confidence against the previous incumbent, Jasmina Halsey, in June 3301. Politically, Hudson is a Republican and a hawk, unafraid to explore military solutions to problems. Hudson's parents were itinerant traders who made their home on their hauling vessel. From a young age, Hudson was burdened with responsibility. He would often be left in charge of his 5 younger siblings while his parents were off plying their trade, and has spoken of the long hours he would spend watching the cargo, with nothing but a rifle for company, in case raiders tried to steal it. The young Hudson greatly admired the military, and when he was old enough to begin trading himself, he made a point of offering pilots a discount on food and beer. Given the standard of food cartridge rations in most barracks, and the low pay soldiers received, this effort was welcomed. When times were especially hard and there was no money to invest in stock, the Hudson family would land on Earth-like planets and hunt for game, which they would dress and sell themselves. Hudson has emphasized that this was perfectly legal. No matter how hungry they were, they never resorted to poaching. The president remains a keen hunter and enjoys taking diplomatic guests on hunting trips, cooking them dinner himself. Hudson reportedly takes particular pride in his steaks. Hudson's entrance into politics was marked by a growing sense that the federal government and its heavy taxes were making it harder for traders to earn a living, while rewarding those who did not want to work. When bureaucratic red tape prevented the family from docking for 24 hours, resulting in the loss of an entire cargo of perishable goods, Hudson decided to do something about it. Hudson has never served in the military, but he is generally regarded as one of us by the Federation Naval Command. His old friend, Lucas Vincent, is now Admiral of the fleet, and the two enjoy a close professional relationship. Hudson has given the military considerable support, investing in improved training facilities, cutting taxes for shipyards, and cultivating public respect for the armed forces. Individuals: Felicia Winters.
Politics has always been a breeding ground for lies. But one lie outshines all the others. And today, we heard it once again. It is the insinuation that to seek a diplomatic solution is weak. that a preference for discussion over conflict means we're afraid to fight. We are accustomed to this, of course. We've heard the President's supporters pervert our words again and again. When we face up to the Federation's previous wrongs, they mock us for our so-called liberal guilt. When we celebrate a détente between the superpowers that will help us oppose the Thargoid menace, they imply that we are traitors. But it is they who are afraid, and with good reason, because the people of the Federation have had enough. They will no longer be manipulated into reckless conflicts that serve only to fatten the wallets of the arms dealers and the privileged. They will no longer pretend that Hudson's tub thumping and saber rattling is anything more than vacuous propaganda. From star to star, Connolly to complex, satellite to station, we hear the same heartfelt cry. Let the mistakes of the past remain in the past, and let the Federation embrace only the best of itself. Let us return to the core values of hard work, honest trade, support for the vulnerable, and mutual respect. The people are ready for us. Let us be ready for them!
Felicia Winters, Liberal Party Annual Address, 3303. Felicia Winters is the head of the Liberal Party of the Federation, and as such serves as ex officio shadow president, opposite President Zachary Hudson of the Republican Party. Winters was born and raised on Taylor Colony, one of the oldest human colonies, and worked for the Sirius Corporation before going into politics full-time at the age of 44. Her current role was thrust upon her unexpectedly. Prior to 3301, Winters was Secretary of State to then-President Jasmina Halsey. When both Halsey and Vice President Ethan Naylor went missing aboard Starship One, Winters became acting president. The assumption of this responsibility left her visibly shaken, and despite her popularity in Congress, it was widely felt that she was not up to the job. The Liberal Party was in a state of crisis at the time following the Lu conflict. A group of forces had sought to make the Lu system independent from federal control, prompting a declaration of war from the Federation. Many of the party's supporters were shocked by President Halsey's decision to open fire on refugee ships during the conflict. According to reports, Winters had questioned the action, arguing passionately with her friend Halsey behind closed doors, while maintaining a front of public solidarity. Consequently, she found herself responsible for a party whose voter base had largely deserted it, and whose values had slipped out of alignment with her own. Shortly after Halsey's disappearance, Zachary Hudson called for an emergency vote of no confidence that he resoundingly won, resulting in his appointment to the role of president. Given the massive support for Hudson and the disarray among the Liberals, Winters was expected to resign and let the Liberal Party rebuild itself from the ground up. Instead, she threw herself into her work, leading efforts to persuade various systems not to defect to the Alliance, and distributing aid packages to planets in need. Her energetic and proactive approach led to fresh support for both her and her party, and she currently rivals Hudson in the popularity stakes. Individuals: Aidan Tanner.
Our species has been banding together to fight the outsider since we lived in caves. We stand against the lawless, the invaders, and the monsters. And we're proud to do it. But you have to remember one thing. Nobody in the history of conflict ever saw himself as a monster. Everyone believes they're the hero of their own story. If you can't understand that, if you can't stand in the enemy's shoes, even for a second, and ask yourself why he thinks he needs to kill you, then you don't know what it means to be a soldier.
Aidan Tanner, addressed to Federal Cadets, 3298. Admiral Aidan Tanner is a senior officer in the Federal Navy. He has served for more than 4 decades, and in 3303 was given significant responsibility in the struggle against the Thargoids, first being appointed to Chief of Federal Security and later to Chief Military Liaison for the Cross-Superpower Initiative, Aegis. He is widely respected, even outside of Federal space, for his conscientious and level-headed approach to conflict. Born in 3254, Tanner was expected to follow in the footsteps of his authoritarian father by becoming a doctor, but instead enlisted in the Federal Navy, along with a group of friends, in what he would later describe as a rash act of adolescent rebellion that I have not once regretted. Tanner's father died in 3277. The two never resolved their estrangement. Tanner's early naval career was anything but distinguished. Known to his comrades in arms as Spoonie for his habit of eating directly from food packets instead of using plates, he was distinguished more by his irreverent sense of humor than his competence. 6 months in, Tanner was found to be responsible for a scurrilous newsletter that satirized several senior officers, including Sergeant Burke Hazel, who was offended and deeply hurt. Hazel had taken a personal interest in Tanner and had encouraged him to persist when the cadet had struggled with basic training. Tanner's defense that he had been trying to improve morale was rejected, and although he was allowed to continue his service, he was marked as a potential insubordinate, a label that would later return to haunt him. Tanner's chief instructional officer, Commander Myra Dunstock, warned him to take military life more seriously. She took Tanner to a refugee facility, an experience he would later characterize as showing him what the military is there to prevent. Tanner recognized a last chance when he saw it, discarded his role as camp comedian, and threw himself into his training with unprecedented energy. The decisive incident in Tanner's career was the Autolycus mutiny of 3271. At the time, Tanner was serving as Chief Gunnery Officer on board the FDN Autolycus, a Farragut-class battlecruiser, under the command of Captain Jaden Horn. The ship was dispatched to restore order at Cold Harbor Station, which had been occupied by rebels following a descent into civil disorder. Captain Horn's orders were to monitor the station and await reinforcements, but when contact with the station was abruptly lost, he became convinced an attack was imminent. Surveillance footage later showed Horn acting in an increasingly erratic fashion. He screamed orders, slurred his words, and struck an ensign for making a minor mistake. Seeing a group of civilian ships preparing to leave the station, Horn ordered Tanner to open fire, convinced they were about to ram the Autolycus. Tanner refused to obey the order, claiming it was unlawful and that Horn was unfit to command. In the time it took for a furious Horn to have Tanner thrown in the brig, the escaping ships had jumped out of the system. At Tanner's court-martial, Horn tried to use his history of rebelliousness against him, but an explosive series of revelations followed. The escaping ships had been carrying evacuees, and the station's apparent silence was in fact due to Horn himself, who had disabled shipborne communications without telling his crew. Horn, who it would later emerge had been suffering from lexalamine-induced psychosis, committed suicide mid-trial by hijacking a fighter and detonating a grenade inside the cockpit. Tanner was exonerated, receiving a commendation from President Antonia Madison for his actions. Individuals. Jasmina Halsey.
I know what they're saying. They're picking my story to pieces. Some of the criticism is rational. The lack of corroborative evidence, for example. I don't mind that. I'm telling the truth, after all. An irrational approach can't hurt the truth. But when they say what I experienced is an archetypal conversion story, and that makes it suspect, if what I saw reminds people of historical accounts, doesn't that say something about those experiences?
Jasmina Halsey, 3302. Jasmina Halsey, a former politician, served as president of the Federation from 3300 to 3301. She now works as a peace activist and close advisor to Alliance Prime Minister Edmund Mahon. Halsey claims the profound transformation of her views is the result of a visionary experience in which she communicated with benign non-human life forms, an episode that allegedly occurred in 3301, following the destruction of her vessel, Starship One. Prior to the disappearance of Starship One, Halsey's presidency was unpopular among federal citizens. Taxes had been raised too many times, and her military interventions were seen as heavy-handed. A campaign to ban the narcotic Onion Head went awry when the crops were firebombed, resulting in collateral damage. During the Lou Rebellion, Halsey gave the order to fire on a civilian convoy, in the belief that a rebel leader was on one of the vessels. Many senior commanders in the Federal Navy lost faith in Halsey and transferred their loyalty to then Shadow President Zachary Hudson. Hudson called for a vote of no confidence in Halsey's government shortly after Starship One went missing and achieved an overwhelming victory. Though Halsey was later found alive, drifting in an escape pod, suggestions that she might be reinstated as president gained little support. Perhaps surprisingly, Halsey's account of her experiences has received a large degree of acceptance among the galactic community. But even those who accept her description of an encounter with non-human entities suspect there is more to the story than has been made public. Skeptics hold that the event presents too many unanswered questions, such as precisely what happened to Starship One, as well as offering Halsey a suspiciously convenient way out of her failing presidential career. The most scathing of Halsey's critics condemn her as a traitor and defector who was conspiring with Edwin Mahan even before she left the Federation, and who staged the Starship One catastrophe as a convoluted means of defecting to the Alliance, taking vital federal intelligence with her. Halsey originally addressed these theories by emphasizing how incompatible they were with her behavior, citing her efforts to establish refugee centers for victims of conflict and her public condemnation of the Federal Imperial Cold War. But more recently, she has simply laughed them off. The Federation. Introduction. For I dipped into the future, far as human eye could see, saw the vision of the world and all the wonder that would be. Saw the heavens fill with commerce, argosies of magic sails, pilots of the purple twilight dropping down with costly bales, till the war drum throbbed no longer and the battle flags were furled in the Parliament of Man. The Federation of the World. Alfred Lord Tennyson, Locksley Hall, 1835.
How then to attempt the impossible task of summing up the Federation? We are the ones who draw the lines. Our forefathers, who lived through the bitter anguish of global wars, drew a line under them and declared, no more. We enshrined the rights of all citizens in our Constitution, underlined them, and signed. We plotted the lines that first linked the star systems, bringing humanity to the shores of new worlds, opening the way to interstellar trade. And when humanity itself, in the exuberance of youth, threatened the delicate balance of alien life, again we drew a line. Thus far let us lawfully tread, and no further.
Isaac Gellin, Federation President. Inaugural Speech, 2862. The Federation is the oldest of the galaxy's three superpowers, a vast geopolitical entity reaching out from the core system of Sol and encompassing a broad socio-economic spectrum. Among the myriad federal star systems, one can find extraordinary wealth, crushing poverty, and everything in between. By contrast with the Empire, which offers a social safety net in the form of state-sanctioned slavery, the poorest members of federal society have no safeguards and no way out. For them, life on the graffiti-stained streets is inescapable, and the gulf between their lives and those of the super-rich cannot be more insurmountable. At its best, the Federation embodies the values of its founding nations: democracy, industry, and liberty. But federal society can also be competitive and unforgiving. Corporations wield too much power, politicians are often corrupt, and a sink-or-swim ethos prevails. The Federation. History. The nations of Earth united in the aftermath of war. After the devastation of World War III, the United States of the Americas rose to become the planet's dominant nation. Over the following years, it gradually brought the other nations of the world under its aegis. Called at first the Federation of the USA, the expanding democracy was soon given the less exclusive title of the Federation. Humanity reached for the stars. When faster-than-light travel became a reality in the 22nd century, several terrestrial corporations competed fiercely to establish the first human colony in a new star system. Tau Ceti was the first system to be colonized, followed by Delta Pavonis, Beta Hydria, and Altair. In their wake, there followed a wild scramble of pioneering expeditions and colonial ventures. The first colony rebelled. The year 2161 saw a dispute between the colony of Tau Ceti III and the Federation Authority, centered on the colonists' repeated refusal to limit the damage they were inflicting on the alien ecosystem. Earth dispatched a fleet with orders to revoke the colony's charter. The colony responded by declaring independence. A military stalemate led to grudging compromise, and the Federal Accord resulted, granting the system rights and representation along with concomitant duties. The Federation, born on Earth, was now an association of star systems. The Birthright Wars gave corporations preferential treatment. Starting in 2621, a group of corporations subjected the federal government to over a century of unrelenting pressure. They demanded the right to buy up underexploited colonial land from its hereditary owners. Under the terms of the original charters, the land belonged to the colonists and their descendants, regardless of their ability to mine, farm, or otherwise exploit it, meaning that immense resources were lying untapped. The corporations argued that with the machinery, workforce, and fleets at their disposal, they could tap those resources. The Federation would be enriched, the original owners would be compensated, and everyone would be satisfied. The Federation bowed to pressure and allowed compulsory purchase of the family's land, albeit for far less than the expected sums. Outrage, rebellion, and in one case, the defiant resettlement of an entire colony resulted. The Federation's detractors often point to this dark episode as indicative of its true nature, a mere administrative puppet bent to the will of rapacious corporations. The Federation. Society. A federated democracy. The Federation's legislative body is made up of congressmen elected to represent their system or state. Apart from the oldest core systems such as Sol, which encompasses multiple states, each star system within the Federation is considered a single state. New colonies do not qualify for full Federation membership until and unless they fulfill the development objectives set down for them. With self-reliance comes representation. The federal government has its seat on Mars, which was terraformed in 2286. Congress was moved there from Earth in the early 3rd millennium. The executive branch is headed by an elected president with a fixed 8-year term. Constitutional rights obtain. The sovereign rights of all individuals are enshrined in the Constitution, which is a modified and streamlined version of the US Constitution, originally codified in the 18th century. The right to liberty underscores the absolute ban on slavery within the Federation and is a point of contention with the Empire. Corporate interests dominate. Although the Federation is loudly and proudly democratic, corporations still exercise tremendous influence over the democratic process, shaping citizens' choices through celebrity endorsement, lobbying, and occasionally outright corruption. The government is notoriously reluctant to curb corporate activity. The typical question in Congress is not whether a given policy will favor corporate interests, but which ones it will favor. Competition between corporations for Congress support can lead to a deadlock in the government. The Federation. Military. The Federal Navy. The Federation has maintained a battle fleet since the days of the first federal colony, which was established in the Tau Ceti system. Its official mandate is to protect shipping and defend the borders of federal space, but it has also frequently been deployed against the Federation's own rebellious citizens. At first, the Federation's member systems were required to contribute the required ships, making the mustering process a cumbersome one. But following the Birthright Wars, corporations were chartered to produce centralized fleets, which made for a far more efficient system. The Naval Shipyards and Training Academy were originally based in the Anlave system, but the Academy has since been moved to the custom world of Navy Central in Eta Cassiopeia. The Navy benefited from massive investment following the forced sell-off of colonial land in the Birthright Wars, during which it was wielded against the colonists in a bitterly resented move. When the Thargoids were first encountered in 2849, the Navy was boosted once again in fear of the alien threat, and a further bolstering followed in 2867, in the aftermath of what were believed to be Thargoid attacks. Governor Raul Santorini championed heavy cuts to the Navy budget in 3022, which were not reversed until President Varian Scott came to power in 3144. Scott talked up the Thargoid threat, again increasing funding to the Navy and removing the requirement for military actions to be approved by congressional vote. Land forces. In addition to the rank and file, the Federation still enjoys the loyal service of special military divisions, such as the Gurkha Regiment, who have served since the days of Earth. Keeping up long-standing traditions such as this is an important link to the past for Federal citizens. The Federation. Culture and values. If you want to eat, you have to work. The Federation has no room for freeloaders. It has nurtured the core frontier values of self-reliance and entrepreneurship since its inception, and respects the self-made citizen. This insistence upon paying your way and pulling your weight also applied, notoriously, to the process whereby new colonies were established. Until a given colony was able to fulfill the development goals set down for it by the Federation, it could only ever be a dependency with no voice of its own. Given that the Federation's assigned goals could vary wildly from one colony to the next, this requirement frequently chafed with the colonists. While the Federation maintained that it was simply exercising flexibility, since no two worlds were the same, some colonies were tempted away to the Empire by the promise of being recognized as sovereign without having to jump through arbitrary hoops. Corporations took humanity into space. The Federation has never forgotten the role played by private enterprise in the initial migration from Earth. Corporations enjoy substantial freedom and influence under the Federation, so much so that it often seems they are the powers truly running the show. Federal citizens can be as passionately loyal to their corporations as they would be to a family or clan group, and it is common for successive generations of a given family to serve the same corporation. Harvest the limitless riches of space, but respect non-human life. The Federation and the Empire have hugely differing views on the primacy of humanity in the cosmos. While the Federation insists that its colonies treat indigenous non-human life with care, the Empire typically takes a more human-centric approach. This attitude has allowed the Empire to poach several developing Federation colonies who felt themselves hamstrung by ecological regulations. Wealth is freedom. Federal citizens actively embrace corporate culture, expressing their identity through brand choices and media consumption. The Federation. Diplomatic relations. The Empire. In 2292, a group of colonists established a settlement on Achenar 6D, chosen for its remoteness. The original intent was merely to live free from interference, but autocrat Henson Duval rapidly took control of the colony and had himself proclaimed emperor. The Federation attempted military reprisals, partly due to the nascent empire's insistence on independence, but faced a harder fight than they had expected and were held at bay. Over the next 50 years, the empire expanded to many other worlds. The Federation's relationship with the empire is one of entrenched mistrust, stemming from irreconcilable ideological differences, mollified somewhat by the corporations, which have a presence in both territories, and thus act as a stabilizing influence. Outright hostilities between the powers, when they occur at all, are usually conducted through proxy forces. The Alliance. In 3228, the federally aligned corporations supplying the Alioth system attempted to raise their prices, leading to a citizen rebellion. Several independent systems assisted the rebels. Neither galactic superpower was able to suppress the revolt. The Empire was too far away to intervene effectively, whereas the Federation was hampered by unexpected public sympathy for the rebels. The Alliance of Independent Systems, founded on Alioth in 3230, drew in new members over the next 20 years. Some were already independent, while others defected from the Federation or Empire. In order to keep more worlds from defecting, the Federation was forced to reform the process whereby colonies could achieve full federal membership. So far, it has only managed to slow the loss of worlds to the Alliance, and has yet to tempt any back. Individuals. Aisling Duval.
My grandfather had an heirloom he used to keep in our winter palace. It was a priceless marble statuette of one of our ancestors standing with his foot on a woman's neck, while she looks up at him in fear or adoration, probably both. I loathed it. It was commissioned to commemorate some victory or other, but that wasn't the point of the thing. The message was clear, and it's the same one I've heard all my life. Deep down, the people we dominate are happy to be dominated. When I was 6 years old, I smashed it. The servants came running. My father stormed down the stairs in his gown. He asked if it was an accident. There was such a strange look in his eyes. I knew that if I said yes, nobody would argue. Nothing more would be said. But I didn't. I stamped my foot and said, "No, Daddy. I did it on purpose." It's the same with tradition. The people who pass it on think it's precious. They expect you to cherish it and pass it on in turn. But what they think doesn't matter, because the responsibility rests with you. If you know it's wrong, then you have to smash it. On purpose.
Aisling Duval. A fireside chat with Serena, 3301. Princess Aisling Duval, born in 3276, is a prominent member of the imperial royal family. The eldest child of the infamous Prince Harold, she had a troubled upbringing. Her father was notorious for his hedonistic lifestyle, while her mother, entertainer Imogen Eccentrica Gabriellini, died from an aneurysm shortly after Aisling's birth. The autopsy identified the cause of death as an overdose of purple sunflake, an obscure and expensive narcotic. The conspiracy theorists insisted that she was murdered to remove an embarrassment to the royal family. Aisling has indicated that she is aware of these rumors, but has never commented on them. Despite living a life of great privilege, Aisling has publicly embraced the cause of the less fortunate and become an outspoken opponent of slavery, something that has made her the target of fierce criticism from more traditionalist imperials. But despite this criticism, Aisling is a popular figure with a widespread media presence. Her campaigning has brought definite benefits to many of the poorest in imperial society, and gone some way towards easing tensions between the Empire and the Federation. Her critics, however, dismiss her as a puppet, doing the bidding of a shadowy circle of advisors. They claim there is no underlying coherence to Aisling's policies. To them, She is a naive and sentimental child, without the necessary experience for politics, backing one populist cause after another, always conscious of how her activism is affecting her brand. Significantly, the most savage of Aisling's critics and the staunchest of her defenders agree on a counterpoint to this, that her apparent vacuity is nothing but a front, carefully created in collusion with the very advisors whom others believe are exploiting her. The People's Princess, they argue, is exceptionally good at being underestimated. Following the death of Hengist Deval in 3301, Aisling was considered by many to be a viable contender for the imperial throne. As Aisling was born out of wedlock, however, and her father was removed from the line of succession on the grounds of mental incapacity, Orissa Lavinie Deval was deemed to have the stronger claim. Individuals: Albert Tesreau.
I may not be religious, but I still have faith. Not the kind my parents have. In fact, I don't think their desperate devotion can even be called faith. The point of faith is that it's tested. And if you insist that your beliefs are above criticism or analysis like the star cults do, you're refusing to allow your faith to be tested at all. What do I have faith in? The fundamental sanity of the universe, I suppose. I don't believe in absolute evil, only in the iniquity that emerges when understanding fails. I believe intelligent life will naturally tend towards cooperation rather than conflict, not because there's a higher power guiding our decisions, but because that's simply the most logical course. And yes, our recent experiences with the Thargoids have tested that faith harshly.
Albert Tesreau. Professor Albert Tesreau is an Imperial scientist, an affiliate of the Achenar Research Council, and a founding member of the Joint Superpower Initiative Aegis, which was established in August 3303 to investigate the Thargoid menace. She currently serves as Aegis's head of research. Tesreau's biological parents were members of the Besmeratu cult, an isolationist group secreted within a sealed compound that believed itself to have been chosen for salvation by non-human beings. The cult's charismatic leader, Anton Hotep, claimed humanity had been under the protection of these beings for millennia, that he was their cosmic messiah, and that only the believers would be saved from the coming apocalypse. In support of these claims, he often produced alien artifacts, allegedly sourced from archaeological digs that other cult members were never permitted to examine closely. Alba was marked as a troublemaker from an early age, due to her heretical belief in rationality and the scientific method. She was formally banished from Besmeratu after she sabotaged the air purifying system, forcing the compound to call for help from outsiders, and thus humiliating Hotep. After her story became public knowledge, she was adopted into the household of Senator Olivia Tesreau of Achenar and awarded a scholarship to study at Grand Imperial, alongside the children of the nobility. She wrote her master's thesis on the potential uses of mathematics as a lingua franca between human beings and intelligent non-humans. She is passionately interested in non-human intelligence and meaningful discourse between species. Despite the counterfeit alien contact myths of her early life, or perhaps because of them, she's determined to do whatever she can to act as a bridge between human and non-human cultures. Individuals: Orissa Lavinie Deval.
I am a daughter, not just of the Emperor, but of the Empire. And I look upon our traditions and achievements with pride. I hold, as my forefathers did, that to be born Imperial is to receive the blessings of the universe. That is the true meaning of the ceremonial wine tipped upon our newborn heads. Does this pride in our heritage make me old-fashioned? Some would say so. I know that there are those in my family who cannot bear the burden of rank and privilege without a chronic sting of guilt. But I ask that you look charitably upon those so ailing, as I do. After all,
Rebellion is the prerogative of adolescence. I ask that you reserve your anger for a worthier target. For those who acknowledge our traditions in public, but privately serve only their own corrupt interests. For those who exploit their ancestors' sacrifices while holding our military in contempt. For all the petty, venal, spineless parasites in our very midst. I have sat with many such parasites, and for form's sake, I have masked my contempt. But that mask has served its purpose, and now I cast it aside. To the worms nestling so complacently in the heart of my beloved empire, I say this. We see you, and we are coming for you.
Arissa Lavinie Duval, private speech given at her post-coronation dinner. Arissa Lavinie Duval is the reigning emperor, having been appointed to the position by the Imperial Senate, and a direct descendant of the first emperor, Henson Duval. Her father was originally thought to be the late Prince Aristide de Lavinie, but Arissa's claim to be the illegitimate daughter of Emperor Hengist Duval has since been ratified by DNA testing. Arissa distinguished herself as a serving senator early in life. Unlike other senators who took their patron support for granted or left the work of intercession to a delegated representative, Arissa made a point of visiting and speaking directly with her patrons. Foremost among her concerns was how little scope for mobility the Empire offered. In theory, it was possible to rise in rank, but in reality, power was hoarded and loyal service went unrewarded. To her mother's horror, Arissa proceeded to go undercover as a slave in the Lagany household on Akana, talking to the staff and listening in on meetings. What she learned would change her view of the Empire forever. The rules could be broken with impunity, so long as the proper bribes were paid. A senator's favor could be secured, a corporation's accounts could be doctored, and an atrocity could be covered up for the right price. On paper, it might be a patronage system, but it operated as a de facto plutocracy. Arissa's experience as a slave also cemented her own view of imperial slavery, namely that it was no worse than indentured servitude, and downright luxurious compared to what the Federation's lowest paid workers had to endure. Non-imperial commentators responded by pointing out that slaves in noble households on Akana could hardly be held up as typical examples of slavery, and that Arissa might have learned more had she spent her time in a Mastopolos mining facility. Arissa has made no secret of her determination to restore the rule of law within the Empire. She means to purge it of corruption, and has received widespread public support for this cause. Unlike her niece, Aisling Duval, she sees the Empire's system as inherently worthy, if impeded by long-term neglect. They need to be cleansed, not torn down and rebuilt, as per Aisling's wishes. As the first woman to serve as Emperor, Arissa is a controversial figure to many, regardless of her personal political stance. Many hardcore traditionalists within the Empire have vowed to depose her and replace her with a ruler more to their liking. Individuals. Denton Patrius.
What disgusts me? That's a perceptive question. By asking it, you reveal that you consider me a man of taste. If you'd asked me what I hated, I'm not sure I could have hidden my disappointment at such a banal question. But disgust, that deserves an answer. It's jealousy that most disgusts me. It's such a petty, self-defeating emotion. I see it every day. Most men look at me and think, I want what he has. Perhaps 1 in 1,000 thinks, how can I achieve what he achieved? Now, he's not jealous, he's motivated. Who knows, we might work together one day. But most men are not like that. They have the desire, but not the initiative. It's like a dog watching you eat and wishing he was a human. And that's the tragic thing about jealous people. They think they hate me, but really, they hate themselves. Because deep in their hearts, they know they're too lazy to fight for their dreams.
Denton Patrius, a fireside chat with Serena, 3302. Denton Patrius is a powerful Imperial senator and the Admiral of the Imperial fleet. He is a controversial figure, admired by many Imperials for his wealth and influence, but deeply unpopular in other quarters for his uncompromising approach to debtors. He is also noted for commanding one of the strongest private military fleets in colonized space. Patrius has repeatedly issued loans to struggling governments via shell companies, only to later hike up the interest rates. When the government defaults on the loan, a common occurrence, Patrius moves in to foreclose. Since few governments are able to match the power of his private fleet, this is usually a one-sided affair, although some governments have appealed for and received the aid of independent pilots. This strategy has brought numerous systems under the control of Patrius's various corporations. If Patrius has any long-term goals beyond increasing his personal power and holding the line against the Alliance and the Federation, they're not publicly known. Politically, he has always played the part of the loyal Imperial. He accepts the need for progress, and has devoted considerable attention to eradicating Emperor's Dawn, an insurgent organization responsible for the assassination of Emperor Hengist de Val. His support for the Empire has been well rewarded, and as Admiral of the fleet, he enjoys an enviable level of prestige. But even this may not be enough, and many have speculated that Patrius harbors a desire to become Emperor. During the period of uncertainty that followed the death of Hengist de Val, Patrius suggested that the title of Emperor be assigned on the basis of public support, rather than lineal descent, a statement that was widely interpreted as a bid for the throne. When the succession passed to Orissa Lavinie de Val by vote of the Senate, Patrius did not contest it. The question of who should succeed Orissa Lavinie de Val is now a pertinent one. Imperial commentators have suggested that Patrius's highly visible courtship of Princess Aisling de Val may be part of a long-term strategy, as well as a piece of savvy media manipulation. Orissa Lavinie de Val has no children, whereas a child born to a Patrius de Val partnership could be an extremely strong contender for the throne. Individuals. Hengist de Val. Hengist de Val, 3163 to 3301, was the 15th ruler of the Empire. He was assassinated on the day of his wedding to Florence Lavinie. Hengist reigned during a time of significant change. The Imperial Senate had begun to grow in power, a process that had begun during the long sickness of Hengist's father, Hesketh. The development of the frameshift drive had radically altered life in human-occupied space, facilitating easy access to goods and interstellar travel, and opening formerly isolated cultures to outside influence. Old animosities between the Empire and the Federation finally began to fade. Hengist appeared to neither resist nor oppose these many changes, instead opting to keep the Empire as stable as he could on a day-to-day basis. This middle ground approach was deeply unpopular with the Empire's hardcore traditionalist elements, who saw Hengist as short-sighted, detached, and complacent. In 3238, Hengist wed Anthea Viola Lampeter in an arranged marriage, planned since his childhood by his late father. Despite a storm of publicity and celebrations across Imperial space that verged on the hysterical, there was clearly little genuine affection between the couple. It was an open secret that the match had been made solely because of optimal genetic compatibility, and that Hengist could not refuse without dishonoring his father's memory. As the marriage crumbled, Hengist spent much of his time with his boyhood friend, Aristide de Lavinie, and his wife, Florence, at their estate on Achenar. Inflammatory tracts from this period portray the Imperial dynasty and its noble cohorts as little more than libertines, indulging in lascivious affairs and lengthy holidays, while the Senate did the real work of government. The most scurrilous rumor was that the Duval genetic code had been corrupted by centuries of interference, prompting speculation that a successor of the true blood would have to be found. The birth of Hengist's heir, Prince Harold, temporarily quieted the skeptics. A carefully orchestrated father-son photoshoot, when Harold was 9, showed the pair riding horses on Achenar, throwing javelins, watching a senatorial debate, and preparing for a seasonal feast. The photoshoot was clearly designed to appeal to traditional imperial values, and it succeeded. For several years after, Prince Harold was the darling of the Empire, a symbol of promise and hope. The intense media focus on the prince's life is now believed to be partly responsible for his fall from grace, which saw him become a notorious playboy and philanderer, and which eventually resulted in his exclusion for the succession on the grounds of mental incapacity. Towards the end of Hengist's life, it emerged that Orissa Lavini, the daughter of Florence Lavini, was in fact his daughter. Hengist intended to strengthen her claim to the throne by marrying Florence, thus legitimizing Orissa, but he was assassinated before this could take place. The most enduring criticism of Emperor Hengist is that he failed to plan adequately for the future. Certainly, the matter of the succession created tensions that endure to this day. Individuals. Zemina Torval.
It is essential to the stability of any state that its members know their place, and that all roles are understood to be equally worthy. To condemn a slave for being merely a slave is the height of stupidity. If your hand were to condemn your foot for being a foot, clumsy and graceless, pressed repeatedly into the filth, you would do well to hack it off at the wrist. Even worse, imagine if your eyeballs demanded that every other part of you should be an eyeball too, in the name of equality. What an abomination you would be then. But the truth is that the Federation and the Alliance think in exactly this way. You will notice that I wear a beautiful stone upon my finger. There is no other like it, which means that only one person can wear it. But that is unfair, cries the Federation. Why should you be the only one to enjoy it? They would have me smash it to bits and give everyone a tiny piece. But then, the beautiful stone would be gone, and nobody could ever wear it again.
Zemina Torval. Midwinter Address to the Bitterwood Children, 3303. Zemina Torval is an Imperial senator with an immense personal fortune and a redoubtable private army. She is an unapologetic traditionalist, especially where the Empire's use of slavery is concerned. Her own wealth derives directly from slavery. She owns a majority share in Mistopolos mining, which depends upon slave labor, but she draws a distinction between Imperial slaves, who are owed a duty of care, and slavery as it is commonly understood. This distinction is in contempt elsewhere in the galaxy, however, and the Federation.
Docking request granted. Landing gear deployed. damage. Cargo hold at maximum capacity. Engines engaged. Landing gear retracted.